So good morning, everyone, and thanks Roman and Thuringen Competence Center to invite me for this talk. And today I will present the topic Provenance and Reproducibility, a look into Jupyter Notebooks. So I'm Sheeba Samuel. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in Heinz Staff Chair for Information Systems. And yes, so Today in this presentation, I will briefly introduce Jupyter Notebooks, and I will then explain how to do provenance information management in notebooks and analyze and ensure reproducibility in the context of Jupyter Notebooks. So first, let's see what Jupyter Notebooks are. So a computational notebook is a virtual environment for literate programming. That means users can share code along with documentation. So the computation notebooks have gained widespread adoption in the past decade due to the, the computation notebooks have gained widespread adoption of the in the past decade due to the emergence of free and open softwares like Project Jupyter. And Jupyter Notebooks have become one of the means to share code along with documentation. And Project Jupyter explains Jupyter Notebook as they provide collaborative creation of reproducible computational narratives that can be used across a wide range of audiences and contexts. So it is an open source software and a web-based application which provides an interactive and computational environment. And Jupyter Notebooks are used in data exploration, running simulations, and visualizations. So let's see what's the Jupyter ecosystem. The Jupyter ecosystem mainly consists of Jupyter Notebook, Jupyter Lab, and Jupyter Hub. Additional service provided by Project Jupyter is Binder. So the Jupyter Notebooks is the one which has the classical Jupyter Notebook interface, and it is an open source web application that allows you to create and share documents that can contain live code, equations, visualizations, and narrative text. So these are used for different purposes like data cleaning, transformation, data visualization, machine learning, etc. And the next one is Jupyter Lab. So you can see the screenshot of Jupyter Lab here. So it is actually called the Jupyter's next generation notebook interface. So it is also a web-based interactive development environment for Jupyter Notebooks. And both the Jupyter Notebooks and Jupyter Lab, they are extensible and modular. That means you can write your own plugins that can add new components and integrate with existing ones. While Jupyter Hub, it is a multi-user version of the notebook, which is designed for companies, research projects, etc. So it gives users access to computational environments and resources without actually burdening the users with installation and maintenance things. So it is customizable and scalable, and it is actually useful for small and large teams, academic courses, etc. The other one is the other service provided by Project Jupyter is the Binder. So the Binder project, it offers an easy place to share the computing environments to everyone. So that means it allows users to specify custom environments and share them with a single link. So and then Binder can also be used in different scenarios like teaching, training, publications, reproducible scientific analysis, etc. And it allows users to share this interactive environment along with the code and the analysis. So you can share a link that let others reproduce and interact with your work. Okay, now some facts about Jupyter Notebooks. So according to Project Jupyter, there are over 1.7 million Jupyter Notebooks, which are publicly hosted on GitHub and have millions of users from several disciplines. So this is based on a blog from 2019. So things have changed right now. So a Jupyter Notebook was formerly known as IPython Notebook. And these notebooks have rich display capabilities because the output of a code cell can be displayed in many rich representations like HTML, JSON, PNG, LaTeX, etc. And audio and video files can also be embedded and rendered. And Jupyter supports over 40 programming languages, which include Python, R, Julia, and Scala. and it can be installed locally in a user's computer or remotely. And currently, notebooks can be exported in different formats like HTML, LaTeX, PDF, etc. And in this way, notebooks can be shared in multiple ways. So now, if you look at the structure, Jupyter notebooks are organized as a sequence of ordered cells. A cell is a multi-line text input field. So there are three types of cells. Code cell, which actually allows users to edit and run code based on the kernel. The markdown cell, it allows documenting the computational process in a literate programming way. So the way the users can explain the code using text. And then we have raw cell, which allows writing the output directly. So these raw cells are not evaluated or formatted by the notebook. The notebook cells can be grouped and reordered by simply like clicking on the cell and dragging them to a particular place. So now let's look into the architecture, which involves the user, browser, notebook server, kernel, and a notebook file. So in addition to running your code, it stores this code and output together with the markdown notes, and which is in a editable document, which is called this notebook. So when you save it, this is sent from your browser to the notebook server, which saves it on disk as a JSON file with a IPYNB extension. So the notebook server, which is not actually the kernel, the notebook server is responsible for saving and loading notebooks, while kernel is responsible for actually running them. So even if there is no kernel, you can still edit the notebook. And you can use a ton of other languages when writing your notebook, like said, R, Julia, Python, JavaScript, and even MATLAB. And these are called kernels, and they speak the language agnostic Jupyter protocol over 0MQ. So you can write your own kernel for the language by directly implementing the Jupyter protocol. And once the kernel exists, it seamlessly work with any Jupyter frontend. Okay. So now let's look into the workflow of Jupyter Notebooks. So scientists working on computational experiments divide and organize their tasks into cells. So the cells are usually edited multiple times until they reach their expected results. So they are executed one at a time, allowing the users to make multiple edits and re-execute them in any order. So the cells can be executed either linearly or in any order. And the ability to execute these cells in any order actually distinguishes these computational notebooks from the traditional scripting tools. So when a cell is created, the notebook assigns it an identifier in an incrementing order. So the cell is reassigned with an identifier every time the cell is re-executed. So users can do many modifications to the notebooks, like inserting, removing, and rearranging the cells. And these operations could derive actually new results, which could be different from that of the past executions. So now I would explain the terms provenance and reproducibility and the workflow in the context of Jupyter Notebooks. So meet two data scientists, Anna and Bob. As part of their work, they perform like several computing tasks which involves data exploration, processing, and analysis. They go through two different scenarios. One scenario is repeatability. So Anna performs some data computation tasks using Jupyter Notebooks. She wants to show her results to her team members in a presentation. So before her presentation, she wants to confirm her results by repeating her experiment. Now, in other scenario, Anna wants to present her result in her team meeting, and she wants to share her Jupyter Notebook to the team members for collaboration. Now, Bob, who is a team member, runs Anna's Jupyter Notebook in his own laptop, which has a different operating system and memory specifications. Now, he wants to compare the results he got from his own execution with Anna's results. So Bob also makes some changes in the parameters and run the Jupyter Notebook in a nonlinear order. Now he gets a different results and he wants to see what was the divergence that resulted in a different output. So in the first scenario, the computational experiment is repeated in the same environment by the same experimenter, while in the latter, the experiment is reproduced in a different environment by a different experimenter. So in both cases, the difference between executions helps the user either to repeat or reproduce and confirm or refute others' results. So this is a formal definition of reproducibility. A scientific experiment is said to be reproducible if the experiment can be performed to get the same or similar results by making variations in the original experiment. And the history of information is actually called provenance. And according to the Oxford Dictionary, the provenance is defined as a source or origin of an object or its history. So provenance of a data product, it is the description of the process or a sequence of steps that actually led to the product, together with the data and the parameters that led to the creation of this data product. So in order to repeat or reproduce, it is important to track the process by which they achieve the result. So in this case, the history of computational experiments need to be tracked. And to track the history, the information needs to be recorded. And this information should include all the artifacts used in a data science experiments, which includes the code, tables, results, execution environment of the experiment, etc. And the collected history then should be available for the user for better visualization and comprehensions. So here we present the key components for the end-to-end provenance management for computational reproducibility, and which includes the capture or the tracking of provenance, provenance representation, provenance comparison, and visualization. So even though the Jupyter notebooks are actually meant for reproducible science because you can share the code along with the text, etc. But there are recent studies which have pointed out that the provenance support in them is limited and pointed out the need for the same in Jupyter notebooks. So this is needed, especially when the cells are overwritten and rerun, and to track how exactly a final result has been achieved, to track the experiments that have been attempted. So one of the 10 simple rules for computational reproducible research, as discussed in the paper by Sandway and team, is to record all the intermediate results in a standardized format. And currently, only the output from the latest execution is stored in the notebook. There's also no support to compare the intermediate results of the different executions. So the provenance of the final and intermediate results are not supported in Jupyter Notebooks. So small changes and errors during the data collection, processing, and documenting phases can lead to significant changes in results. And so tracking which code or function resulted in a particular output becomes cumbersome with limited provenance support. Hence the presence of provenance support in these notebooks for computational reproducibility is desirable. So in this talk, I would like to present Provebook, which has not only Anna and Bob, but also all the uses of computational computation notebooks, which including user Jupyter notebooks, to repeat and reproduce computational experiments performed in Jupyter notebooks with the help of provenance. So it's a novel solution for supporting computational reproducibility through Jupyter notebooks. It provides the key components to capture, represent, store, compare, and visualize the provenance for computational reproducibility. So Provebook, it supports capture and management of provenance information of its different executions of the cells over the course of time. So the motivation behind the development of Provebook is to help scientists who use computational notebooks for their data analysis and exploration. So in order to help users from every discipline, irrespective of their programming skills, the design of Provebook is kept simple so that it could be adopted as an easy to use tool. So every time the code cell is executed, the provenance of the execution is stored in the metadata of the cell, which actually includes the start and end time of each executions, the total time it took to run the code, and the source and the output got that during that particular execution. A slider is provided so that the user can drag to view the history of the cell executions. And in this way, users can share the notebook along with its provenance. And in this model of Provebook, we actually provide a provenance difference to compare the different executions of a notebook. So this model helps in the scenarios that we have discussed in Anna and Bob. And it actually compares the input and output of between two executions, and it extends the NBDIME library from the project Jupyter. So with this, Bob can reproduce and compare the execution of Anna's notebook with his own execution and see if there is any difference in the input and output, and the difference is then highlighted for him. So we have already heard about ontologies in the previous talk. So here we also aim to semantically represent the provenance information for the script execution. So we use semantic web and ontologies for representing the notebook and its provenance. So an ontology is a formal, explicit specification of a shared conceptualization. And using ontologies, we aim to make the computational experiment understandable along with their context. So Provebook provides the user the ability to convert the notebooks into resource description framework, which is called RDF, along with the provenance traces and the execution environment attributes. So RDF is a standard model for data interchange on the web. And here we use the reproduce me ontology to describe the provenance of the notebook. And through this description, we can answer questions like, what is the complete path taken by a user for a computational notebook experiment? Or what is the sequence of steps in the execution of a computational notebook? Or how many trials were performed for a particular cell in a computational notebook? So the RDF can be downloaded as a total file either from the user interface of the notebook or using the command line from Provebook. So it allows the users to share the notebook along with its provenance in RDF and also convert it back to a notebook. So it provides a reproducibility service where the provenance graph is actually converted back to a computational notebook along with its provenance. And the provenance graph of the notebook can be converted back to a notebook using a command line. And these modules in Provebook actually help to provide the capture, management, description, comparison, and visualization of provenance information. Now we look into the reproducibility of notebooks. So there are millions of repositories and platforms like GitHub. And in these repositories, there are also millions of computational notebooks, which contains code, text, visualizations, and results. So are all these notebooks, which are shared publicly in repositories like GitHub, reproducible? Is there a single button to reproduce them? So here we present Reproduce Me Git, which is a tool where users can examine any GitHub repository and obtain an extensive analysis of different aspects of notebooks, including their structure and reproducibility features. So the goal of this tool is to help the repository users and owners to provide an overview of the reproducibility of notebooks in a selected repository by providing information on the number of notebooks that were successfully reproducible, errors that occurred during the execution, the difference in the results from the original notebooks, provenance history of runs, etc. So here we provide an overview features provided by Reproduce Me Git. So this tool covers both reproducibility study and analysis of the structure and usage in notebooks. So it provides the information of notebooks which successfully or unsuccessfully finished the executions. And out of the successfully executed notebooks, it provides information on the number of notebooks that had the same or different results compared to the original notebook. Now, for notebooks which failed to execute, the tool shows the exceptions that occurred in their executions. And these exceptions include the import error, module not found error, file not found error, or input error, syntax error, etc. And it also provides direct access to Binder and Provebook. So we have already learned what is Binder. Binder is an open source web service provided by Project Jupyter to create this shareable, reproducible environment. And Reproduce Me Git also provides an export feature supported by Provebook to capture the provenance in RDF described by the Reproduce Me ontology. So for the analysis of the structure and usage of notebooks, it provides an overview of the repository, the notebooks in the repository, the cells in each notebook, the modules used in each notebook, the execution environment of the notebooks, etc. So now let's see the flow of Reproduce Me Git. So Reproduce Me Git provides a user interface where users can enter a repository URL and reproduce Jupyter Notebooks using a reproduce button. So the tool fetches the content of the repository using the GitHub API, processes the repository and scans it for Jupyter Notebooks. So it then loads the notebooks and extracts information on their structure, cell, modules, etc. And in the next step, to execute these notebooks, the requirements for the environment setup are collected and installed. So after setting up the environment, the notebooks are executed using the Python version of the original notebook. And supported by Provebook, Reproduce Me Git stores the provenance information of all the executions. Now we use the NBDive tool provided by Project Jupyter to calculate the difference between the two executions. And then the analysis on the reproducibility study of the repository is then visualized in Reproduce Me Git. So here we see the UI of the Reproduce Me Git. So here on the top panel, you can see the highlights of the reproducibility study. For example, how many notebooks have finished or unfinished the execution, how many notebooks in a repository have same or different results from the original notebook, what are the exceptions, how many exceptions occur during the notebook execution, etc. And in the bottom panel, you could see a detailed view on the repository, notebook, modules, execution, the execution order of the notebooks, etc. Now, to conclude, Jupyter Notebooks are meant for reproducible research. And through our tools, we provide additional features to support computational reproducibility by tracking, managing, describing, comparing, and visualizing provenance informations. So one example is the Provebook, which is an extension of Jupyter Notebook, which supports computational reproducibility. And another one is the Reproduce Me Git, which performs the reproducibility study on repositories containing Jupyter Notebooks. And in our future work, we also plan to track metadata from Jupyter Notebooks by analyzing the code. And we also plan to conduct a reproducibility study of Jupyter Notebooks collected from GitHub using Reproduce Me Git. So I would like to acknowledge our team, Fusion and Carl Science Foundation for the funding of this work. And you could find more information on this research in the shown links. And thank you.